I believe that I should win this debate because ultimately my proposal has a strong moral justification and a positive impact on our nation's economy and future, and reclaims America's historical identity as a nation. First of all, I would like to address my opponent's point on the military. Now, my opponent once again brings up the argument that cutting military spending will be harmful to national security and international security, whereas I argue that military spending, if we choose to do so, to allocate for reparations, can make a positive impact because they minimize our deficit and make the international community a more peaceful place. Cutting military spending will ultimately not harm our nation. Additionally, my sources on this issue have greater qualifications and warrants than my opponent. I cite think tanks such as the Brookings Institute and Peterson Foundation, which are both respected research institutes. This makes my argument more valid and salient in comparison to my opponent's. Next, my opponent points out that using the U.S. Census is not an efficient way to account for who is African American. However, the U.S. Census Bureau is incredibly reliable because their data is statistically significant. Even if this does leave for some ambiguity as to who can be considered African American, it only helps extend the impact of my plan. In this way, more people are receiving these reparations, and thus it is generating a more powerful and inclusive form of justice. Lastly, I would like to affirm my proposal, which is to give African Americans reparations in the form of housing vouchers and educational investments to poor African communities, and income tax subsidies to upper middle class communities. There is a strong moral justification for my plan, which my opponent does not address, that being the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow laws that have set up racist structures in American society. African Americans have been exploited and dehumanized since they first arrived in our nation, and we see long-term horizons of this manifest today in the form of housing discrimination. Housing discrimination is a blatant form of de facto segregation. It has pushed African Americans into a cycle of poverty because they're forced to live in areas which do not provide them with adequate access to public goods and services. My plan allows for economic mobilization because it promotes housing and income stability. This allows African Americans to live in more affluent neighborhoods, giving them access to more public goods and services, which in turn creates more economic opportunities for them. Next, giving upper middle class African Americans tax subsidies is a powerful way to promote consumer spending and ultimately help generate revenue in our economy. In sum, I believe I should win because my plan solves for harms in the status quo, those being housing discrimination, which puts people in a cycle of poverty and helps strengthen America's future. It is time that America address the blatant forms of structural oppression towards African Americans today by paying reparations and reclaiming our identity and history as a nation on the forefront of the world.